I'll hand you over to Guy. Aliens, who and what they really are. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you everybody for coming today. What a horrible day it's been, man. Wow. I think we've done ourselves really proud to come here to this wonderful event. And thanks to David for organising it for us. Thank you. Well, this presentation, What Are Aliens and UFOs and Where Do They Come From, is the culmination of a number of different pieces of channeled work that have been from two major books of mine, The History of God and The Aang Dialogues. There's 4 other books in between here, and there's one other book that's about to be published, but these 2 books are the ones that get the information that's relevant to this particular presentation. And what I'm going to do is to go through 3 or 4 main areas. 1, what are aliens, in terms of the different types of aliens, okay? 2, how do they travel around? 3, where do they come from? And 4, a little bit of an idea about where we get these abductions from and what they sort of mean, okay? So that really goes through our agenda today. But what I want to do first is to really let you think about something a bit beyond where we are now. Now, I'm really pleased that some of the teachers at the lecturers this morning actually touched upon some of the things I want you to consider today. Specifically, Nick, about the possibility of these things being organic. Because there's a lot of truth in what you're saying there. We exist in a multiversal environment. We've heard Professor Stephen Hawking and other sort of physicists say that we live in a multi-universal environment. But there's more to it than that. We're not just in a multiversal environment, we exist in parallel conditions as well. But parallel conditions are a completely different presentation of our own right. And there's much more to it than meets the eye. But this multiversal environment is something which is created within a larger body of sentient energy. Now, we sometimes call it God, we sometimes call it source or the origin. I'm taught to call it source because the origin is something much bigger and also links in with Hindu texts. But this multiversal environment is a part of that source of sentient energy. And within that source of sentient energy, smaller, individualised units of sentient energy that are our higher selves. And I'll come into a bit more detail in a moment. But this multiversal environment, and by the way, if you don't get it first, I shall explain it again later, is basically created through 12 full dimensions. Now, mankind, or scientific mankind, thinks of dimensions as in terms of frequencies. So when we talk about the 3rd dimension, the 4th dimension, etc., we've not quite got it right. My understanding is we exist in frequencies that are within sub-dimensions, which are within full dimensions. So our multiversal environment is created through 12 full dimensions. And in general, those full dimensions split out into 3 components, sub-dimensional components. And those sub-dimensional components split out into 12 further units of frequency levels or frequency bands. And those frequency levels or frequency bands house, or have the capability of, and do house, self-contained, simultaneous universal environments in their own right. Not parallel universes. That's something else. That's something that we can create through our choice of going left or right, forwards or backwards, taking this bus or that train. We create parallel versions of ourselves in fractal different ways. So each of us will probably have 1,000 different versions of ourselves, experiencing different things. Some of you may have decided to come here. You did come here. Went on the train or the bus instead of driving around. And these are different things that are happening around us. But in essence, that's something that this is created and is destroyed as a function of our experience and things going through an evolutionary cycle that reaches an evolutionary dead end and comes back into a mainstream. What we have here is a multiverse which is the mainstream. And so what I'm going to show you now is how we exist within it and how we work with it. If we take 11 of those full dimensions, the second full dimension up to the 12th, as operating in the same way, then we get 11 times 3 times 12 frequencies, which is 396 frequencies, or frequency levels or frequency bands. Think about each of them creating or having the capability of sustaining a self-contained simultaneous universal environment, we have 396 universes. But what happens to the first full dimension? The first full dimension uses the lowest frequencies within our multiversal environment. And because they're the lowest frequencies, things don't operate in the same way. That first full dimension splits out into 3 subdimensions. But it collapses back into a composite subdimension, which only allows 12 frequencies to be created. But those 12 frequencies are so low in frequency that they have to be used in totality, well, all of them together, to create a universal environment. So although we have this 396 plus 12 frequencies, creating 408 frequencies, we only have 396 plus 1 universes. So there's a difference there between the number of frequencies and the number of universes. And that's because the first full dimension houses all the lowest frequencies. First full dimension is the only dimension with 1 universe, the physical universe. The physical universe is the only universe that has 12 frequencies associated with it, in my understanding, in the work I've channeled over the last 17, 18 years. Okay. So, when we consider that aliens, ETs, other vehicle forms that we observe are generally in the physical universe, we can relate to the physical universe in general terms. But there are 4 different versions of our alien form. Okay? In my understanding, we are part of a much larger being, which is part of a much larger being. That which we call God sometimes, or Source, made smaller individualized units of sentience attached to energy and projected it into that multiversal environment to experience, learn and evolve. Okay? That equates to what we call our higher self, what I'm told to call the true energetic self. The Hindus call it the Godhead. Those of you who've read Dolores Cannon's work will know it's called the Oversoul. It's the same thing. It's that bigger part of us which remains disincarnate. It's at least 70% of what we are. But why do we come to the physical universe? If we've got all this rest of this universe, this multiverse that we can work with. It's because we involve ourselves in a multiversal environment to experience, learn and evolve on behalf of our higher self. We're called aspects, by the way, smaller aspects. Religion calls us souls. I don't like to use the word soul because it creates a level of individuality, which is there all the time. But we're not individual all the time, we're part of a bigger part of us most of the time. We come here, though, to experience, learn and evolve in an accelerated way. Now what that means is we have to experience difficulties, being almost cut off from frequential condition, because from a communicative perspective, because the frequencies are so low here. It's like comparing the fastest broadband internet connectivity you've got compared to, well, using 2 baked bean cans with a piece of string in the middle. Yeah? The level of communication is so slow here, we start to forget who and what we are. So we incarnate into a vehicle, a body, a bit like we use the diving suits to go down into the sea to experience that, to experience a lower frequency environment. This is an extremely low frequency environment. And so the only way we can experience it properly is to be part of that low frequency environment. Okay. So we have different body types. The Earth is one of the many, multiples, billions of different planets that we use to incarnate into to experience, learn and evolve. And so we move around different planets, different frequency levels, in different galaxies and locations. What you're seeing now is only visible with these. Okay? The gross physical eyes only see between 400 and 750-ish nanometers. What's beyond that is undetectable. It's still there, but we don't see it. As human beings, we tend to think that what we don't see, we don't believe in, unless some piece of technology comes along that proves it to be there. radio waves, X-rays, gamma waves, ultraviolet, infrared. We only know that they're there because we've invented technology based upon our limited condition, the human eye, to detect it. Where we can detect it, we know it's there. So right now we have the human body. We know the human body is there. So the first of these alien bodies, or should I say incarnate vehicles, is in the gross physical. The human form is created with 10 energy levels or frequency levels. The first 3 are the gross physical. The next 4 are the spiritual physical. Sometimes it's called the astral. Although the astral with spiritual people is the 4th level, around the heart chakra area. The next 3 above that, from 8 to 9 and 10, is the spiritual levels. All of those 10 frequencies allow some form of incarnation. Above that, there's other conditions I'll talk about, which is energetic, which is outside of the need to incarnate. So we've talked about the spiritual and physical, 4th and 7th. Okay? Sometimes the 4th level can be clarified as being the lower astral. Sometimes it can be classified as the astral full stop. In my understanding, the 4th frequency is the lower astral, the 5th is the upper lower astral, the 6th is the lower upper astral, and the 7th is the upper astral. And so these are demarcations or levels of understanding based on different levels of channeling, for instance, or teachers, or old and ancient texts that explain to us where we come from. Within these different levels, we can't, as gross physical beings incarnate, we can't see those entities, those souls or aspects of sentience that have incarnated into a vehicle to experience the physical universe in the 4th frequency level. We can't see them. They're a higher frequency. Our body is designed to work with 3 levels of frequency. The visual range is 400 nanometers to around 750. Those souls or aspects that incarnate into those bodies that are in the 4th frequency level can see us. They walk around us right now. They're here all the time. But they work in a different environment, a higher frequency environment. Those that incarnate in the 5th frequency level, still within the physical universe, see those in the 4th and the 3rd. But those in the 3rd and the 4th can't see those in the 5th. So you can start to understand now that there's a bit of a hierarchy in terms of what's perceived, interacted with, based upon which frequency level you incarnate into. I didn't touch really on the functions of those in the gross physical, because we don't have many, do we? We're here, we experience, learn, evolve, we eat, sleep, work, die, go back to the energetic. But these other beings who are incarnating into higher frequency levels, and we do as well, we don't just incarnate into the human function, we have other body types in other planets, in other galaxies. Some form of body control is available to us as well. Think about all those yogis. We don't talk about these days anymore because it's not the 1960s anymore, but who hide themselves away in a box or a cave, and they live for 100 years, 200 years. They stop their heart, sometimes for months. These individuals are working on that level of frequency, and they bring their frequencies down to come and interact with the rest of us, to prove, we're still here, we've moved to frequencies, we've disappeared out of your perceptual range, your visual range, but now we can work together. This is the same with these other vehicle types that we have in the rest of the physical universe. They have control of their bodies. From about the 4th frequency upwards, you start to lose the need for gross physical energies, nutrients, eating, drinking. You can start to use energies directly from the energy centers called chakras. So they've got a lot more connectivity and functionality. And from the 4th frequency up to the 7th, there's a marked difference. Big difference. So these individuals, if they made themselves aware, or made us aware of them, for instance, would appear to be like gods. They'll be able to create things, manipulate things, make things move by thought of their intention. It's still incarnation. Those entities that are incarnating into a body or vehicle type within the physical universe that are in the 8th to the 10th frequency are incarnating into vehicles or bodies that are in the higher sort of spiritual realms. When you get towards the end of the 6th and 7th frequencies, you start to go into the 8th and 9th and 10th, it's almost as if it's not incarnation. It's almost as if the body doesn't exist. Those of you who are aware and awake, or becoming more aware and awake, will be able to link into them, perceive that they're there. You won't be able to see them. There are people, of course, who can see things like human auras, but the human aura is only visible to the 7th frequency level, and after that there is no perceived aura associated with the human form, because it only works with the spiritual and physical aspect of what we are. So entities, aliens, that are in the higher frequencies, 8th to the 12th frequency, would be almost classified as being not incarnate, but they would still be there. Oh, and by the way, for those of you who've been noticing the pictures, I took these off the internet because they almost gave a good idea of what they would look like if we could see them. Yeah? The gross physical being almost like the human body now, or some of the images you see on Star Trek, for instance, or other science fiction films. I mean, the plethora of different vehicle types that are out there in not only our galaxy, but the rest of the universe is unbelievable. Think about the number of body types there are on Earth. Insects, fish, mammals, birds, and the apes, which includes us. Thousands of different species and varieties. This is an example to us of the different types of body type that we can incarnate into in the rest of the physical universe. So these body types are also created through the environment that they go into incarnate into. What's the best form factor to incarnate into? Has it got gravity? Has it got no gravity? Has it got a good dense atmosphere? Has it got no atmosphere? And so you start to get a body type which is basically designed or developed based upon the environment you're supposed to exist in. And there's variations upon variations of what we call a human form. Some of them have no legs but 4 arms or 6 arms. Think about some of the Hindu texts that show blue individuals with 6 arms. Where does that come from? Maybe they saw other versions of humanity that come from different parts of our physical universe. These guys, the spiritual types, the ones that are in the 10th to the 12th frequency, they are almost totally connected with the rest of themselves, their true energetic self. That big part of themselves which is always disincarnate, always in the energetic, always in the rest of the multiversal environment. They know who they are, what they have to do in their incarnation. They're able to navigate through their incarnation in a karma-free way, not getting addicted to the thoughts, behaviours and actions associated with being in a low-frequency environment. They maintain themselves. They can continue to operate and function in a way consistent with their environment. Metaphysical functions are basically what they'll work on. Telekinesis, telepathy, creativity even will be second place. They wouldn't even think about it. Communicating with other versions of themselves, or other body types, or other individuals on those levels, certainly across galaxies, and definitely across different galaxies, not a problem. They know what they are. They know they're in an incarnated state for a certain period of time, they know what they're doing. The body form will be amorphous, basically. The gross physical looks a bit like this. It's very solid. You You can feel it, touch it, taste it sometimes. The spiritual and physical will be the same, but lighter, but only detectable, or should we say tactile. You'd only be able to get a tactile response on those levels associated with the frequency that it's incarnate into. The higher the frequencies, the more finer they are. So the finer the body type is, the less it needs to rely on physical energy, eating, etc., drinking. In the spiritual frequencies, there'll be total control of the body. They could be incarnated into one form, but control it and make it into something else. They wouldn't need to have the form that it was created in the first place. It can be metamorphic. They can change it. Because the frequency is so high, the manipulation of that form factor would be very easy. So one moment it could be like a representation of a human being, next moment it could be like a representation of, say, cuttlefish, I suppose, if they wanted to do that. But that's the sort of thing they could do. They could change from one particular form factor to another, without even thinking about it. Their creativity would also be massively greater than what we are now. We create through our intention to do something and use our hands to do it. You start to use telekinesis in the spiritual and physical form factors that are out there, in the 4th to the 7th frequency. In the 8th to the 12th, creativity is used by materialising things. Having the intention to do something, the desire first, then intention, the thought, and then the action, and you would create whatever you needed to create. Within the confines of the frequencies associated with the physical universe. The physical universe has these 12 frequencies. And what we see with our telescopes, which are based upon the frequential response of the human eye, is a 10th of what's out there. Okay? You see your telescopes, you see all these stars, and if you look further across with the Hubble telescope, you can see galaxies, and there's lots of blackness in between. And we think, wow, the universe is mostly empty. How does it stay together? There must be some sort of attractive force somewhere. Scientific mankind thinks there's an attractive force somewhere, we'll call it dark energy. It's not dark energy, it's something we can't see, that which is represented in the physical universe at the 4th frequency level, or the 5th frequency level, or the 6th frequency level. The Earth is one of a number of locations where we incarnate into that's a pan-frequential body, and that means it's represented on the 1st, 2nd and 3rd frequency, where we are now, and the 4th, 5th, 6th, up to the 12th. Others only come into existence from our perspective at the 7th, or the 8th, or the 4th, or the 9th. And so, if you go to the 12th frequency level and look through your telescope, you wouldn't see any black. It's totally white, or occupied with different opportunities for incarnation, for experiencing, learning, and evolving. It's the 4th genre of entity. This is purely energetic. These are aspects of sentient energy, either projected from our true energetic selves, this oversoul or Godhead or higher self, into a smaller unit of sentient energy, just experience different parts of the multiverse, sometimes here. We definitely wouldn't see these. But we do sometimes see, if they come down lower in the frequency, and I'll explain how they may do that, we sometimes do see them with our photography. Nick's mentioned some of these things as well. What's this? It's amorphous mass. Sometimes that amorphous mass is also an incarnate body, or a vehicle used by an incarnate individual or individuals to experience this low frequency environment. So these levels are called the energetic levels, basically. They are the areas where we aren't incarnate, but they are those that are above the physical universe. And we do visit, or we do come down to these levels to see what we're going to get into before we become incarnate. There's no form factor, at all. But sometimes if you do capture them on a digital camera of the right quality, and the right level of, should say, couple charged devices where they can go right into different frequency levels, although they still convert things into what the human eye sees. We sometimes consider like balls of energy, although that's just one form that it can take. These individuals are totally connected. Everything they can do in the energetic is just done by pure intention and pure thought. Instantaneous connectivity with their true energetic selves, or higher selves, or Godhead, and Source. Instantaneous connectivity with the universe, or the small parts of the universe called galaxies, etc. They can do anything they need to. They can manipulate, create planets if they wanted to, create solar systems. They are usually highly evolved. That's not to say that we're not highly evolved. It's just that there are times when we get to a point where we don't need to incarnate, but we can still see what's going on and experience, learn, and evolve on the back of those who are doing it for real, us here, for instance. So basically what we have there is 4 body types. Gross physical, first 3 frequencies associated with the physical universe. Spiritual-physical, next 4. Spiritual, which is the last 8 to 10, last 3, okay, 11 to 12, that's 12, yeah. And then you've got the purely energetic, which is those above the 12th frequency, and therefore those that go into the next 4 dimension, second 4 dimension. But sometimes we need to move around. And what I've discovered is that there are 3 main vehicles that are used to move around the environment they come into. Within the gross physical, well, we know this, don't we? We see UFOs as being all sorts of different shapes, saucer shapes, triangles, cigar shapes. They move around by using mechanical means. Some of the means that were described in the book, The History of God. But in essence, they use technology to manipulate space around. They use gravitational forms of technology to move by attractivity. They use various different forms of functions of electromagnetic responses to move around. They can move around very quickly by moving from one frequency to another. They tend to shortcut the point from A to B by moving from the frequency that they normally exist in, increasing their frequency, going into that frequency and finding an exit point at the next point in their frequency to come down to our frequency. So they appear to move very quickly, go from there to there in seconds, or instantaneously. So they may be able to move from one side of our galaxy to the other side in seconds, or depending on their technology, a couple of days for instance. But basically they can move really quickly. When they use the method of transport, or they activate their drive, they appear to disappear because they're moving from this frequency to another frequency. The next vehicle type exists with those form factors or body types, or alien body types, that are in the spiritual and physical levels, the 4th until the 12th. So I'm also including there the spiritual, because it's a similar sort of thing. It can be a mixture of mechanical or pseudo-energetic stroke biology, if you want to call it that. They can't normally be seen in the physical universe. So the only time we see them at our level is when they come down to this frequency level. They use different frequencies to move around again. They go to higher frequencies, or they can find the gaps in between the frequencies. They have the frequencies in between the frequencies, or the gaps in between the frequencies to move around. Interestingly enough, they come here to experience, learn, and evolve through observing us. And so they do it from a distance. But to do that, they have to enter into our environment. So, with the use of various different technologies, we call it sacred geometry, for instance. Again, we've touched about moving the ether, having cloud bursting technology. And there's plenty of evidence that there was another couple of individuals who were using sacred geometry with different materials laminated together, sometimes rotating or moving and sometimes not, actually do move clouds around or create different cloud conditions or remove them. But these technologies also allow them to move around fast, but more importantly, maintain their frequency level. If you think of it, when we incarnate, we come down to a physical body to experience, learn and evolve. We forget who we are, and we become almost totally absorbed in our particular incarnate state. Our human body is who we are. And a temporary personality that I'm told to call the ego is created. The more and more we incarnate we become, over our years, from being born to 7, 8, 10, 14, 21, etc., we start to become immersed in who we are. We don't have any communication. There is, but we generally can't connect to it unless we're trained or know how to do that. Without our higher self, or other individuals who incarnate, or other individuals who disincarnate. So we haven't got that capability. So if we incarnate into a different body of a higher frequency, we came here, and we didn't protect ourselves, we'd also lose that capability, which is not just communication, it's functionality as well. So these vehicles, whether they're purely mechanical from a spiritual physical perspective, or they start to become sort of biological, pseudo-biological, sort of pseudo-energetic, tend to have some form of shield around them to maintain their frequency level. We do this, don't we? You don't know, do you? Of course you do. Of course you do. An aeroplane maintains a lower frequency environment in the cabin so it can go to a higher frequency, a rarefied atmosphere, to move around and come down again. A submarine maintains a higher frequency environment, air, to enable us to move around in a lower frequency environment, water. So we also use this idea of maintaining an environment that's conducive to our functionality, our frequential functionality, based on where we originate from the incarnate perspective, to move around the environment. So therefore it's not unreasonable to consider that these vehicles pop into existence and pop out of existence. They pop into existence when they're here. Sometimes they're surrounded by light or some form of energy field that we can't understand or discern. And sometimes they look as exactly as they are, but only for a moment, because they may be just popping into existence to experience something quickly and then move out again. I'll just explain most of this, but basically this is all to do with maintaining functionality. If they moved out of their vehicles without having some form of protection around them as well, they would start to forget who and what they are and start to lose their functionality. They would start to become the human being. Which is why we sometimes get reports of humanoid or other images moving out of craft, whatever the craft is, and they glow. Sometimes it's because of their normal frequential state, and moreover, if they're from the frequencies just above where we are, they are protecting themselves, maintaining their frequency environment so they can still work, whilst also interacting with it, like a diving suit. Purely energetic. Purely energetic beings are those that disincarnate. So when they come here, they just create whatever they need to create around themselves. If there's a group of them, they may create a collective energy around themselves to move from one point to another, or to move into this environment. And so we start to see larger spheres, or amorphous movements of energy, and small ones. Sometimes we think they're ghosts, sometimes we think they're something else. Sometimes ghosts are, in fact, something else, but that's another lecture. But in essence, those individuals that are disincarnate but come here, we can't see unless they protect themselves and they start to use something which interferes with this frequency. So they're creating an energetic environment that protects their higher frequency, and it could be in the fourth dimension that they come from, for instance, which is very high frequency, and therefore gives them ultimate control over everything that they do and the environment. But to come here without that protection, they start to lose everything. So this is why we start to see these strange rifts sometimes. Sometimes they're scars from the movement of one place to another place, where either a mechanical vehicle or an energy or a spiritual, physical, slightly energetic vehicle or fully energetic vehicle moves from one place to another, and sometimes it is that energy associated with that vehicle, whether it's fully energetic or whether it's mechanical in some way, shape or form, with a mechanical shield around it to help it move whilst maintaining the frequencies of that particular incarnate group of individuals or disincarnate group of individuals. We're starting to see more of these, by the way, and that's because we're capable of understanding what it is. It's ever evolving. You might not think sometimes when you see some of our political standings that's going on around the world, but we are moving up the frequencies, we are evolving in an average way. So we're starting to see these things. Not just with our photography, but also with our physical eyes at times. Moreover, with our perception, and our perceptual vision overlaid on our physical eyes. So we've got 4 different genres of vehicle, or body type that we incarnate into. One of them is purely energetic, one of them is gross physical, one of them is spiritual physical, one of them is spiritual. And we have 3 different types of vehicles that move around. One's gross physical, one's a higher frequency physical vehicle. Another one is purely an protective energy to protect the disincarnate sentient energy, the soul, or the aspect, to go into a low frequency and protect its own functionality, its own beingness. I've touched upon some of the areas that these people come from, these entities come from. So I'll go over it again so you can understand it more. The general understanding about aliens and UFOs from our perspective is that they're mechanical. They come from the first 3 frequencies available to the multiverse and the first 3 frequencies that create our physical universe. They're gross physical. They move around sometimes with higher technology, but they're basically within the visible range that we see with our telescopes. Sometimes we call them Arcturians, sometimes we call them Syrians, Pleiadians, etc., etc., etc. Sometimes those different races or incarnate civilizations are in slightly higher frequency, like the 4th or the 5th, for instance. But in general, those that we interact with, or people have been abducted by, and we'll come to something about that later, are in the gross physical environment. There can be other planets close to us, or other stars, or other galaxies as well. The spiritual-physical is fairly similar in terms of location. It's just that it's a higher frequency level. So there would be other planets, other solar systems, for instance, nebulae or galaxies, that are only presented on the 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th frequency levels of the physical universe. So we don't see them. But they're nevertheless there in various levels of increasing frequency and therefore decreasing gross physicality. So they exist in the gaps in between the bright stars, the bright galaxies that we see with our telescopes now. They're there by frequency. They're here now, on the Earth now, looking at us, observing us, seeing what we do with our free will. Because actually a lot of these individuals in the gross physical don't have free will. They don't have individualised free will. They have various different forms of collective will. Sometimes it's individual free will tied into collective will. In a more extreme case, moreover, it tends to be a bit like a hive mentality where they're all working together for a common cause. But in general, these are in the areas of the physical universe that we don't see as high frequency. There will come a time where we do see them because we'll have developed a thought process that allows us to move beyond the gross physicality and into a, well, actually, because we can't see, doesn't mean it's not there. We'd like to think we think on those lines, but we don't. But when we do, we'll start to create machines that allow us to do it, and people who are becoming self-aware and self-awake through their own personal work, meditation, etc., will start to perceive them and sometimes see them as an overlay on their physical eyes. Spiritual as well, they also come from, again, what you call nebulae, galaxies, planets, etc., that are presented to us in the 8th up to the 12th frequency levels. Again, they are within the physical universe. Again, they're in the gaps in between the stars and the solar systems and the galaxies that we see now, because of the higher frequency. Remember, if we're on the 7th frequency level, as an incarnate body, we can see what's going down the 6th, the 5th, the 4th, and here in the 3rd, but we can't see what's on the 8th. So we can't see it above the frequencies unless we use some form of technology, whichever that technology is, to enable us to move into that frequency temporarily. Then we can see something. So they're also invisible to the human eye, and they also have to use some form of technology to come here. But in essence, they're in the physical universe, just at a higher frequency. The purely energetic visitors here don't exist in the physical. They exist in any of those universes represented by any of those frequencies that are in the sub-dimensions and full dimensions. So anywhere in the multiverse generally. Although it has to be said that I do, in general, this is a generalisation, not always the case, tend to only see individuals who are from the 5th full dimension down. Okay? Now, we talk about dimensions and whether we exist in the 3rd dimension, when we go to a 5th dimension. And I always say that my understanding is we don't exist in dimensions, we do. It's a higher function structure. We exist in frequencies, really. But spiritual mankind says, oh, we're going to evolve from the 3rd full dimension to the 5th. Oh, how are we going to do that? How are we going to jump a dimension? Oh, 4th is time. But we all agree that time doesn't exist. So how can you move from one point to another point and move through something which we agree doesn't exist but want to exist? So that for me is the key that shows that dimensions are much higher pieces of structure. And it's the frequencies that we are part of that create what we are now. So visitors to the Earth and other locations within the physical universe at other frequency levels, not just ours, that are disincarnate or energetic, can be either the larger body of sentient energy that we're part of, as smaller aspects of sentient energy, smaller units, that are part of this higher self, this God head or oversoul, or it could be the oversoul itself. So depending upon if we're lucky enough to interact with these beings, what it feels like, we'll know whether it's a true energetic self or a Godhead or the soul, higher self, a smaller individualised unit of sentient energy associated with it, which we sometimes call the soul, or of which the maximum of 12 can be created, by the way. And then there's another level down, where our aspects or souls can create 12 smaller shards, which are, again, have another level of sentience associated with them. But from our perspective, we'll just stick with the one level as we do. So basically, there are potentially 12 of us from our true energetic self at our level of sentience here on Earth or other parts of the physical universe, or other parts of the multiverse as well. So in essence, the energies that are part of those entities that are disincarnate originate from a higher frequency outside the physical universe, in another universe, that's associated with their evolutionary development. Because we move through this multiversal environment as a function of our evolution. The evolution of our true energetic self or higher self. Getting back to it, to remind you, the multiverse can be parallel, but that's something else. We'll deal with that in another potential event, another lecture. Is connected to 12 full dimensions. In general, from the 2nd full dimension up to the 12th, those full dimensions split out into 3 sub-dimensional components. Each of those sub-dimensional components further split out into 12 frequency bands. Each frequency band allows the manifestation of a self-contained, simultaneous, not parallel, universal environment in its own right. The first full dimension, because it houses all the lowest frequencies, Although it splits out into 3 subdimensions, those subdimensions collapse into a composite subdimension, which only allows 12 frequencies to be created. But those 12 frequencies are so low that they all used to create a universe. So we have 397 universes, but 408 frequencies. And the physical universe is the only universe that has 12 frequencies. All the others are one universe, one frequential band, but with sub-frequencies in the middle. Gross physical exists in the first 3 frequencies of the physical universe. Spiritual physical exists in the next 4. Spiritual exists in the next 2. Energetic exists in the rest of the multiverse. So you see there's a definite demarcation in the genre of forms, body types, or radiant vehicle body types, and the vehicles we move around in, or how we perceive those vehicles, or what's used to move around, depending upon the frequential origin of that which is in our physical universal environment. I said at the start of this talk that we put a little bit of light on abductions. Abductions tend to be a favourite subject with ufologists, and one of the things that I've picked up over the years is a couple of reasons why we do get these abductions happening around us. Before we incarnate, we go through a series of things we want to experience. And some of those things we want to experience is being helpful to other souls or aspects that are incarnate in other vehicles, so they can understand what it's like to be in this level. On the Earth, for instance, one particular example, and experiencing individualized free will. So we create this pre-incarnation agreement to be a guinea pig, if you like, to allow certain implants to be put into us, certain monitoring systems to see how our sentient energy, our souls, are interacting with our bodies in the environments that we're in the way we interact with others within the environment. And so there are times when some of these implants are used for monitoring how we're coping, what we're doing, but how we're also dealing with the environment, how we're destroying or creating with the environment, and how we're working with this individualised free will. So, if you think of it in a different perspective, scientists like to look at how animals are working in the wild. So we take them from the wild, don't we? We scare the living daylights out of them. We poke them, we prod them, we take their temperature, we take blood samples, we put GPS tracking devices on them, we set them away again. And it's probably in a different location from where we took them from. So they wake up thinking, how did they get into this field? Okay? Well, if we do that to animals, it seems reasonable that we've agreed to have it done to ourselves if we're interacting for a greater good with other incarnate civilizations. So when we're taken, we're poked and prodded, we have blood taken, we have GPS transmitters or whatever they are attached to us, and we're put back onto Earth, and it's 50 miles away. You think, what happened there? It's the same thing. Basically, we always work together, even though we don't think we do, with other incarnate civilizations or body types, so that they're benefiting from us being here in a very unique environment, where we're in control of ourselves individually and control of our environment individually. This is interesting. Back in 2012, I had the extreme honour of working alongside Dolores Cannon as an equal on her New Earth cruise. And there was an Australian person there who asked me a question about, he felt he'd been abducted and got trying to work out what it was. So I sat and meditated and tried to understand how I could answer him. And in effect, it worked out that he wasn't in the first body that he was incarnate into. He was in a second body. The human body was a secondary incarnation. He had originally incarnated into another body at a higher frequency. And that sentient energy, soul, had left part of it there and decided to experience incarnation as a secondary incarnation in the human form. We do this, actually, quite a lot. Not all the time, but we do it quite a lot. So what he was experiencing was the communication between that part of his soul in his earth incarnation and the part of his soul that was still left in the body in the location of primary incarnation, which is a different frequency, as it happened in a vehicle not too far from the location of our solar system. And so he was helping, through being incarnate in a secondary way, through mechanical means. By the way, the higher the frequencies you go, you can do this by your own intention, not by using mechanical means. This is a mechanical method of doing this. Helping those other individuals who he'd incarnated with to experience, learn, evolve through monitoring him. Through monitoring that soul that was with them, or that's also in another body. And so he was being taken sometimes, or was remembering where he was, or was receiving telepathic communications about what was going on, how the body was responding, how it was coping with getting the imageries from, one incarnate state compared to another incarnate state. And so he experienced momentary blackouts, being one place and then being somewhere else, waking up in the morning thinking he'd been on a different location on a ship somewhere, because they moved his sentience momentarily from the secondary incarnation, the human body, into the primary incarnation of the vehicle he was in, his first incarnation. So that's another reason why we sometimes get this thing about being incarnate and moving forwards in our what means of evolution. So really, we have to think in terms of what aliens are. Aliens are just another form factor that we incarnate into. They're another way in which we can move into this environment. Not just the human body we use, there's not enough of them. We think 7 billion is not a lot of bodies. It's not enough. We need to experience, learn and evolve in a different way each time we incarnate. Different environments, different limitations, different skills, different abilities, different environments, different level of creativity, different levels of stress, different levels of joy, pain, delight, hunger, affluence. All these different ways in which we experience, learn and evolve are based upon being in different environments, in different bodies. In general, though, and given some more detail, this secondary incarnation is used for research, usually for learning, for those individuals who can't incarnate into the lower frequencies. Incarnating on Earth, by the way, is quite an honour. And most spiritual circles will tell you there's a bit of a waiting list. 7 billion bodies, how can there be a waiting list? But there is. Because there's countless billions of higher selves or true analytic selves that have 12 or more souls that want to project into different parts of the multiverse or the physical universe to experience and learn and evolve in an accelerated way. So this is how sometimes souls or aspects evolve. They do it through somebody else's work, tapping into us and learning through piggybacking off what we're doing, either mechanically or telepathically or energetically. So we gain the opportunity to understand on a regular way how we do progress. We progress directly or remotely. Okay. So, really, in summary, aliens are just incarnate entities, they're bodies that our souls or aspects use to experience, learn and evolve in an accelerating way in a low frequency environment. Just like we do. They're different vehicles, that's designed to work in a different environment, at a different frequency level. Their souls and aspects are just the same as us. In fact, we do a lot of the time actually, incarnate into these body types as well. we, and therefore them, incarnate into all the frequencies associated with the physical universe. And sometimes we come here to observe and be purely energetic, rather than being incarnate. So, there could be not incarnate. An alien, so to speak, can be not incarnate, or it can be incarnate in higher frequencies, or it can be incarnate in a higher frequency. But taking on board this point of view, that in actuality, our souls are individualized sentient energy given a body of energy that works in a smaller unit that is like a suit that allows us to experience the lower frequencies of the multiverse, the physical universe in this instance, and that we view it in different planets, different galaxies and different frequencies. Who are aliens? They're us. Thank you. We've got time for any questions, haven't we, I think? Any questions?
It's all right.
Okay. Yeah. Well, this is a slightly different slant to what you're probably used to. But in essence, this is the information I've been getting, and it's actually tying in quite nicely with the way that ufologists are starting to move into it. I was really delighted with Nick's presentation. And it just showed physical evidence with physical technology of what I've been perceiving and what I see as well.
I'm just wondering if you think the aliens come from our universe, or is it constellations we know of?
They can come from constellations we know of and constellations we don't know of. Galaxies we know of and galaxies we don't know of. To think about the physical universe, in terms of the visual range, the first three frequencies, the gross physical, is immensely huge. And there's billions of galaxies that we see. So there can be, we only see the first bit, so to speak, and those that are behind that we don't see. So there's going to be those that are in the first bit, very close to us, Alpha Centauri, for instance, or Tau Ceti or whatever, and those that are further behind the galaxy we can't even see, and those in the galaxies well behind that as well.
How does the karmic the process?
If you think of us as being energetic in our normal state, but then when we enter into a gross physical environment, sometimes it becomes a bit interesting, doesn't it? Think about how we get addicted to alcohol, or cigarettes, or food, or status, or certain thought processes. We start to want to experience that again because we like the ability to control people, like the feeling that sex gives us, or that smoking cigarettes gives us. And so that's that addiction, which is what karma is. Not just this ability that, if I hit somebody over there, they've got to hit me back to cancel out the karma. It's about how we interact with that individual, and how we think, behave and act in here, and how we interact with our environment as well. And it's about being incarnating in a karma-free way, within a physical human body, or any of the other potential body types in different planets at different frequency levels. It's about how we navigate through this low frequency environment without becoming addicted to it. And that's the karmic aspect. And there's a plethora of different ways in which we can be caught by it or try to move away from it. When we can incarnate in any body type, in any physical location, in any frequency, and do it without getting attracted to any of these different addictions, then we've moved away from the need to incarnate and we don't need to do it anymore.
So is it likely that people could reincarnate in the same vehicle if they kind of haven't learned?
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes, yes. Yeah. Sometimes if there's like a karmic looper in, we would go back into a human body, for instance. If it's somewhere else in the universe, we do it in another body, for instance. And sometimes we give it a break so we can come back and do it later. So it gives,
somewhere in the Indian text about the commands, about the place of high things, was massively most head up through the frequencies. And some of the writings of some of these Solomon talk about the place of the commands, travelling through into gross matter. So I think what you mean to gross.
It's another way of explaining it. I mean, if you look at read Indian texts and philosophies and teachings, and you start to look at some of the Indian texts, the other side of the world, these are the Hindus, and you look at what's, and then you look at Tibetans and other bits and pieces, you start to see that the information is the same, but it's got different levels of detail and different levels of understanding depending upon the education of the individuals passing the information on and the location in the world. So you start to see that if you look at it from a bigger picture, it's the same thing but with different words, different levels of understanding, different levels of teaching, different levels of education. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah. Thank you. Good. Two things have happened. One, we've been educated. And you look at the number of science fiction films that are out there now compared to what we've had previously. Well, if you don't watch them, it doesn't matter. But the thing is, it's to do with, we've been exposed to the possibility, because they're out there, of different body types. But we now accept them. We no longer find them abhorrent, do we? Lizard types, arachnoid types, all these different bird types. You look at all the different science fiction films, and you think of a body type, it's there. Yeah. So you start to get this education there. We're at a level of acceptance. Moreover, though, it's about our frequency level. Because we're at a higher frequency level, we're starting to perceive and see those incarnate bodies that are probably at the top end of the third frequency level or the bottom end of the fourth frequency level. And so we're starting to see more of our universe and those incarnate entities and their vehicles and their environments, their habitats, for instance, that have always been there but we've never seen before. So we're at a higher frequency. Undoubtedly, provided we don't listen to certain political individuals.
So a few months ago, I had a report a couple of years ago in the SAGB, Cornwall, got files back what we were saying, the point you're saying tends to be natural physical plane existence in low vibration. I'm kind of wondering if really the gift is us being is higher than we assume or free will to my kind of think that we may be able to say we're a bit like the unruly teenagers deciding we can do whatever we want or maybe being that sort of planet.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's what the reason is called energy. See,
Yeah, well, I think adolescence is a good way of putting it right now. We were totally in the comatose state in the medieval times, weren't we? Well, back things we were doing there. But it is all to do with, we think we're in control of our environment, not even in control of ourselves. So it's when we start to think in terms of actually what, as the Buddhists do, if I do this, how does it affect that person over there? How does it affect that person over there? How does it affect my local environment? And how does it affect the wider environment? When we start to think in those ways in a automatic, unthinking way, then we'll move into the next frequency level quite quickly.
How do you feel that animals this?
Well, we go spiritual, aren't we? There was a. This is some of this stuff's in my first book, The History of God, by the way. There was a although in terms of the creation of smaller, individualised units of sentience and energy, initially, that wasn't a perfect process. And so there's different levels of quality of sentience. And so we are one level of quality of sentience, and the animals are just another level of quality of sentience. Now they can, with time, in interaction with us, the right sort of us, by the way, they can, through their work, also evolve and start to enter into the level of quality of sentience that we are naturally in. But that takes a long time to do. They're just a different level of sentience.
Sometimes feel higher. Sometimes feel that higher.
Well, if we treat them, they don't have an agenda, do they? They just want to exist and be here and be loved, basically. That's the thing. Thank you. I'll get you next. Yes, please.
I was wondering how you see the angelic realm fitting into your paradigm.
Wait for my next book, The Curators.
Oh, right.
Basically, the angelic realms is simply an understanding of what we see as being angelic. Looks nice. It's energy, isn't it? Going back to the idea of the level of education we have, when you see something in front of you that's sort of straight and has got lots of energy around it, and the sort of straightness looks like a bit of a human being, and the bit of energy around it looks like wings, you think, oh, it's glorious, it's angelic, and then you get some artists come around that draw human beings with wings. You get the impression of an angel. But in essence, these entities that are angelic, so to speak, are sometimes disincarnate entities that are visiting us. So they're purely energetic aliens, you want to call that. But most of the time, they're those entities that maintain the environment. We call them elementals. I call them maintenance entities. Yeah? Elementals or nature spirits. They're those sort of individuals. And we do sometimes observe those. Sometimes we see them in different form factors, depending on what they're doing. Sometimes they present themselves like human beings. Sometimes they present themselves in completely grotesque images because of what they're doing with the environment. Sometimes they appear as balls of energy. Yeah, thank you.
The lost souls, do you think it's a lower
there's no such thing as a lost soul. There are souls that are so addicted to being on Earth that when their body demises, they want to stay on Earth. And so they hang around a bit. And they do sometimes cause problems because they use a lot of energy creating mayhem, poltergeist activity. And sometimes they're trying to contact their sort of the family, the people that they knew. But in essence, they are this sentient energy that's moved up out of the body and is coming down as close to this frequential environment as they can. And this round about the fourth level is about as close as they can. So they would also interact with incarnate individuals at that level. But they're never lost. They have other disincarnate beings or entities that are helping them, guides and helpers, who are doing their best to get them back out of this thought process of they're still incarnate or they want to stay here, to pull them back into the energies that they're doing. What you're doing is you're giving them energy to move upwards. It's a different thing. Yeah. 20,000 years is nothing.
Where do you see incarnate, the incarnation that's where it's not incarnate, it's something you wish to be reincarnated? Whereas is that the end of something?
We incarnate in the first three, the gross physical. We also incarnate in the next four, which is 4 to 7.
Where do they come from? Where's heaven?
Heaven is in the multiverse, above the physical. It's in the true heaven is recommunion with Source or recommunion with God, our Creator. That level is beyond it's beyond the 12 full dimensions. Yeah.
Where would what we term as jinn and shadow?
Jinn. Where would I classify the jinn or the shadow people come from?
Below us?
This is the lowest you can get. This is hell. By the way, this is hell. Well, the physical universe has a major component, and that's its duality. So positive and negative, up and down, left and right, forward and backwards, yin and yang. Basically, those individuals, and if they've got, sometimes they misappropriate higher functions, like they're able to work with high frequencies, are generally incarnate, or they're on higher frequencies and they try to manipulate lower frequencies. So they can be incarnate, but they can also be entities that are created by us, astral entities as well. We sometimes create them accidentally or deliberately to affect other people. We don't like somebody, so we thought forms, yeah. And sometimes they're created through the natural evolution of energy. So it's naturally created. But these entities, they do need to link in with us sometimes to perpetuate their own existence, because they can't metabolize their own energy. So they link into us sometimes and latch onto us to take our energy. Yeah. Thank you.